Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast. And with me today, I have Neill Briggs from BAC Mono. Hi Neill.
Hey Sam. Great
Hi,
to be
can
here.
you tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Neill Briggs with my brother Ian. We're the two co-founding directors at BAC, or Briggs Automotive Company. And we founded the company back in March 2009. So incredibly, we're almost coming up to, we've just surpassed actually our 11th anniversary. Yeah, and in essence, Ian and I started the company on the back of a very successful automotive design consultancy based in Germany, working for all of the major German-based manufacturers across various disciplines. My background is I'm an engineer, so I studied at Manchester University, mechanical engineering, and then specialised in my final year in terms of an automotive-based project. And Ian studied at Coventry University, which was, I think, the first university in the world to have a course for industrial design, but transportation specialised. So it's almost, if you like, the artist and the engineer coming together. And so that was a successful business. We worked on so many different areas of various different cars, whether that be mass produced, low volume, luxury, sporty. As you can imagine, the share of the disciplines was quite straightforward, with the engineering side, obviously, with myself, and then the more kind of styling, interior, exterior type stuff, which was Ian's area. And of course, over sort of 20 years, you build up a experience in all these different areas. You build up experience of working with various different suppliers, and you also build up a reputation. And so when you decide in the middle of arguably the world's biggest financial downturn in 2008 to start a car company, when we started to knock on the suppliers' doors and said, hey, can you help? And the answer was a resounding yes. So that's how everything started. And amazingly, at the beginning of the project, it was just Ian and myself. He was sat around his kitchen table in Stuttgart, and I was around my kitchen table in Cheshire. And we started to bounce around this concept for the car. And that's how the company started.
What led you towards a single seater, like specifically? What problem sort of had you come up with, or what were you missing to go, let's make this car?
It's a great question, actually. And I think the short answer is that it was a singularity of purpose. All of the vehicles that we as mere mortals drive on a daily basis have to do various different functions, everything from practicality to, in my case, dropping off kids, picking up kids, having fun, interesting driving experience, carrying luggage, multiple passengers, comfort on long journeys, short journeys, all these various different attributes. And we said, wouldn't it be fantastic if there was a car that was designed just for the sole purpose of driving? And very much like motorbikes, actually, in that case. If you look at a Ducati Panigale, nobody looks at it and says, where's the passenger going to go? Where am I going to put my weekend, storage or anything? This is a bike. It's quite clearly just for the enjoyment of riding a motorcycle. And of course, the car industry has many, 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 many niches. But really, when it gets down to high performance cars, we've kind of hit a bit of a dead end, or we haven't really progressed beyond the kind of two-seat GT supercar, as we call it. At the time, I was heavily involved with racing, won various British championships and was racing in Europe. And certainly I wouldn't have stood around my race car over a gin and tonic in the evening in the garage and showed it off to somebody, because it was a race car, right? So if it was a bit ratty and panels didn't fit very well, it was fine because it was a race car. And likewise, any nice cars that we had, you'd never take them on a track day because it's going to get covered in stone chips, you're going to break the brakes and all these different things. So we said, wouldn't it be great if there was this car that existed that was equally at home on the racetrack as it was on the road? And all it was about driving. And that's where the concept came from. And it was really interesting because obviously, as brothers and as if you like, the engineer meeting the artist, there's always going to be this overlap of differences of opinion, which actually we get on great in that respect. But there was never, ever any discussion of whether it was one seat or tandem or two seat or side by side or three. There was never any discussion. It was a single seat, because a single seat formula has evolved, over 60, 70, 80, 90 years. The engine, there's been side by side. The engine's been in the front, it's been in the back, it's been mid-engined and so on. And the formula layout has been optimized over many, many, many years because it's the best for performance. And simply that's where we started. And it's great because, all of the discussions that we have, throughout our 10, 11 year history it always comes down to one single focal point. It's about performance. If it doesn't enhance performance or the ownership experience, the driving experience, then we just don't do it. And that usually means that most of the decisions are based around, weight saving, increasing performance, and making the car even better. It's great to have that singularity of focus from a sort of design specification perspective, because normally it would be, well, yeah, we can do this, but we're going to lose some luggage carrying capacity, or we're going to compromise comfort. On a normal car, there just aren't any compromises to make in that sense. So it's great.
When you're coming up with these ideas and stuff, and you're attacking it from a sort of engineering point of view, and your brother's the design, is that's how you split it? Or that is what you guys do?
Yeah, I mean, design is a terminology that's used in the car industry predominantly for styling, and designers hate being called stylists because they think that they carry a pair of scissors and wear frilly shirts. But joking aside, engineers are designers. It's just that they're more preoccupied with function as opposed to form. And I think the great thing with this car is again, taking the superbike analogy. You look at a superbike and you look at the front of it, it's predominantly bodywork. There's fairing, there's some front forks and so on. And then as you start to move towards the back of a superbike, you see more and more of the mechanicals. The mechanical is part of the aesthetic. And so therefore, I've always had an eye about what I like to see. I don't know why I like it. And if there's something wrong with it, I don't know how to change it to make it better. That's why, a designer or a stylist are as good as what they do. And consequently, in terms of the function and making it the best that it can be, then that's where the engineers know what they want as well. And it's a question of how we just make this entire package work in unison. And I think that's what's so great about the fact that Ian and I had worked together on so many different projects and part of bigger project teams, of course, that we had this kind of understanding of who always had the final word on something, whether it was left or right, and not with any animosity ever. It was always a question of, okay, fair enough, And I think the great thing about the entire innovation team that we've got here at BAC is that, again, because it's all about performance, it's, okay, is what we're doing, well, is it going to improve performance, And ultimately it's about that, but also it's about the form enhancing the function. We all know that you've got to look at it and go, wow,
yeah,
I want that,
And it does look cool. I remember the first time I saw it. When did you launch it?
So the car was launched at Retro Classics in March 2011, and first deliveries were 2012.
Yeah, I remember it just like when it came out. You're just like, what the hell? There's this single seater thing. It looks mad. Do you have a lot of issues like nowadays? People are always designing stuff for pedestrian protection and stuff like that. Do you get to fly under that radar because of your production numbers, or do you have to design for safety, external safety?
I mean, I wouldn't say that we get to fly under the radar. I think the regulations are written very sympathetically based on the number of cars, which obviously then translates to risk and sizes of companies. So I think the regulations are very appropriate. Yes, is the short answer. There's certainly in the UK, there's about 52 different legal requirements. That can be everything from a radius of an external surface through to wheel arch apertures, lighting positions, vision, safety, and so on and so forth. So, design is all about managing compromises ultimately, and it starts absolutely with the regulations, and it starts with safety, and then it works down from there. And actually, very interestingly, the actual layout of the car, we started off with a mannequin. You can't have the driver's feet protruding past the axle center line. So that kind of defines that position. You put a mannequin of various different proportions in, and then you put a 4-cylinder engine and a 6-speed Hewland gearbox, and before you know it, you've got your wheelbase. That's kind of straightforward in side view, and then in plan view, you look at it and say, right, well, the wheels have to be covered. Certain parts of the wheels have to be covered, and then you define what you call in design engineering in terms of your hard points, effectively rollover protection, lighting positions, wheel arches, and before you know it, you've got kind of like a basic layout. And then, of course, it's all about where the inspiration comes from the aesthetic, the external aesthetic, and that's very, very difficult for what is a brand new product. Most things that exist are an evolution of an existing design. And when someone comes along with something that's completely new, like the iPod, people are going to compare it to a Sony Walkman, for example. And so, in our case, we obviously hit the nail on the head with the overall styling. But the hardest thing has probably been the new car, because that's the kind of second album, and it's an evolution of the first car. So the first car, because it's a revolution, you kind of, you've got some latitude there to kind of do what you want. Whereas the second car, it's a bit like the 911. It's really, really difficult to keep evolving it over time. Yeah. And that's been the biggest challenge with the new car, I'd say.
What sort of thing has evolved over the years from car number one? Because it was quite a lot of evolution, even just within the first car from the beginning to the end, wasn't there?
Yeah, sure. So the first car had a 2.3 litre 4-cylinder engine that was made by Cosworth. Cosworth were very active in Formula One. We felt when we launched the first car, because no one had heard of BAC, that it needed to have named brands on the car, the AP Racing brakes and Cosworth engines, etc. So the first car had a 2.3 litre, 280 brake horsepower, 280 Newton meter of torque engine. The second generation then went to a 2.5, 305 brake horsepower, 310 Newton meters of torque, so significantly more and a lot more mid-range torque. There were various different features which we'd added in terms of options, listening to the customers in terms of some of the things that they wanted to see. Right up until the version that we're building right now, we have been for the last 2.5 years, which is what we internally call Mono W. So that means the wider chassis. Yeah. Externally looks the same, but we've basically made it to accommodate bigger people, larger people. Okay. So there's wider space in the cockpit. We now have offered a made-to-measure seat that's molded to the driver, made-to-measure steering wheel, a lot more personalization. And so there's been effectively 3 different versions before any of the Mono R that you saw at Goodwood, or indeed the all new Mono, which sort of was launched at Geneva Pool, as we called it. So yeah, there's a lot of modifications and iterations throughout the process.
So you're saying that are all of the new cars wider, or is it an option to have a slightly narrower or slightly wider?
So the current car that we produce, if you go for the made-to-measure seat option, and obviously you need a made-to-measure seat because the standard seat doesn't fit you because you're a larger person. And I mean by large, I just mean that you're probably bigger than 6 foot. 6'6", I think, is the biggest guy that we've got in the car. A guy in America is 240 pounds, 6'6". He's just a big guy. Yeah. So that just gives them more shoulder room, more elbow room, and means that they can fit in the car. Some other interesting features as well that we've evolved over the years, so that we had a conventional handbrake system that was installed in the top of the cockpit. For taller drivers, it's where their knees used to clash. So by deleting that and going to an electronic parking brake, we basically found a bit more real estate in the cockpit. So they're the kind of things that we've evolved over the years, really. But yeah, the car we make at the moment, it's kind of one size fits all with that made-to-measure seat, really.
I remember I came down to see you guys at, where was it, Spa? Yeah. And I think I drove an earlier one and then a later one. And just driving it round a track, I've never driven a single seater other than like a go-kart. Having then been out, I think I've been out in my M2 and then went out in the Mono. And it's just completely different. Just like a whole different ball game to driving any other car on track. I was quite astounded by just that single seat experience. It just doesn't compare to anything else. And when people ask you about it, you're like, well, it's just different. Like, it's just something different. And until you've tried it, you can't really explain it.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, first of all, sitting in the middle, you find with any normal saloon car, left or supercar, left or right-hand drive, you find there's a personal preference as to which way you want the corner to go, just based on your body position in the car. You feel more comfortable. It reacts differently. And that's not just because of weight and weight distribution. So first of all, you're sat in the middle and there's this neutrality of performance left and right. And then secondly, of course, you've got no A pillars or B pillars or rear view mirrors to obstruct your view. You've just got this entire, vision of the landscape that without any intrusions. And you just feel at one with the car. And particularly on the track is where it all comes to life, of course, because, the kind of rawness of the driving experience all makes sense when you go on the track. And it takes you just into a completely different zone, of course, with the flat shifts that you do and the blip on the down change. I'm just thinking about it now. It's too long since I've been because of this damn virus, but it is a very, very unique experience, and it's very hard to explain in words. That's why some of our onboard footage that we post usually gets so well supported, because it's an opportunity for people to really understand what it's like to be the driver.
Yeah, I remember one of the standout things when I first saw one. I saw one in Monaco. I don't know. I think it was down maybe for a show or something, and I just heard the guy changing the gears, and you just get that. Like, what was the decision process for going for that gearbox versus a more conventional setup?
Yeah, no, great question. So the gearbox, which is from Hewland, weighs 40 kilos and it changes gear in 45 milliseconds. So it's a manual gearbox. It has 6-speed. It's a 6-speed sequential gearbox. It's very similar to a motorbike. It has straight cut gears in it. And all of that is built and designed around reducing transmission losses. So the power that's created by the engine and what that translates ultimately down on the wheels. It's a very compact gearbox. It's also very expensive, but you don't get something for nothing. And it can be operated by a manual gear shift in the cockpit. And indeed, Formula 3 cars used to have that system before they went to a paddle system. The paddle system is driven via a compressor that's positioned underneath the gearbox with an accumulator. And it basically compresses the system and fires the actuator that you've been talking about. But it's quite similar to a gunshot, actually. It
is.
And it's interesting because when we first heard it, we thought, wow, it's quite unrefined, but it's actually become something that really defines the car, I think.
Yeah.
A bit like the neutral button, because of course, with it being a sequential gearbox, you have to take it out of first gear. Normally you would do that with a lever and you just push it forward into neutral. Yeah. And so there has to be something that fires the gear into neutral. And of course, as a safety aid, if the car was running and someone was outside the car, you wouldn't want to be able to reach in and pull the pedal and the car would fire off down the road. So there's the neutral, there's the neutral button strategically placed. You have to do it with 2 hands. And a lot of the feedback we've got from customers is that it's a real nuance of how you interact with the car to pull away. But it's common denominator in terms of supply that we've had since the beginning. We're up to car 120 now across 40 countries, and it's a very robust gearbox. Very robust gearbox.
When you said it weighs, what did you say, 45 kilos?
40 kilos, yeah.
45
milliseconds to change gear. Yeah.
What does like a 458 gearbox weigh?
Well, great question. So,
sort of double clutch.
The standard DSG gearbox weighs about 100 to 110 kilos.
Okay.
Which is the same weight as our entire engine. And I think the other point to make as well is that the gearbox is fully structural.
Okay.
So all the gearbox loads are fed into the gearbox casing. So normally a conventional car that, probably most of your listeners drive on the road, you'll have an engine that's mated to a gearbox, and those two will sit in a subframe, which is a metallic structure that is then bolted to a body structure. And so you have all these overlaps of interfaces that all add weight complexity. And so by feeding the suspension loads directly into the gearbox, we reduce the number of components down to an absolute minimum. That's one of the reasons how we keep the weight of the car down as low as we do.
Do you do that in other areas of the car as well?
Yeah, I mean, the gearbox is probably the best example of it. So an example, the engine is what we call semi-structural. So if you look at a Formula 1 car, the engine bolts directly to the back of the bulkhead and it's part of the structure. It forms the torsional, vertical, lateral bending stiffness of the car. We still have some of the chassis structure that comes around it. So we say that the engine is solidly mounted. It doesn't sit in a subframe that's then bolted into the car. And, to be fair to the way how everyone else does it, apart from Mercedes with the Project One, of course, which also has a solidly mounted engine, they do it for comfort reasons, So most car engines sit on engine mounts, which are isolators to isolate, noise, vibration and harshness. Yeah. Because our car is all about performance. That's the one attribute that's fairly low down the pecking order. As I say, it's designed about a trade-off, and ultimately for weight and performance, it's what we trade off against NVH.
Yeah, it's definitely that's another thing you definitely notice, like along with the gearbox, is how the engine sort of feels like it's bolted to the back of your head. You get all of those vibrations and everything. In terms of like engineering and manufacturing processes and stuff like that, has that changed quite a lot since the beginning to now? And there are a lot more, some processes you're using a lot more now that basically weren't available, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think since we moved, so back in the day, we were based in Cheshire. in a very small environment to keep overhead low. We were approached by the Mayor of Liverpool and his regeneration team to move to Liverpool, of course, synonymous with car production for almost 60 years. So we were more than happy to come to Liverpool. It's a great place to do business and a great place in terms of supply chain access to people and skills. But yeah, I mean, when we did, we started to re-look, because obviously we then moved into an 11,000 square foot facility, and we could essentially start from blank sheets of paper. So the way the car is now put together, it's been evolved with the various teams who build the car. And we build the car in 3 different modules. So we start off with what we call the driver safety cell, which is the chassis. And we basically build up all the components in there, from the fuel tanks, the wiring harnesses, steering column, pedal boxes, etc. On the front, we basically have what we call our storage box, which also serves as a deformable structure in terms of crash, various different reservoirs, what we call our ship plate, which basically encloses the structure across the front of the car, anti-roll, bar suspension mounting points, and so on. That's the front end module, the driver safety cell, which is in the middle. And then the rear of the car, essentially, we've got a complete gearbox assembly, very, very similar to a Formula car. In fact, it's exactly inspired by the way Formula cars are put together. In a separate area in the factory where we build all our sub-assemblies, the gearbox is put together with all of the suspension arms on it, and it comes on a marriage trolley. The engine goes in, solidly mounted, as I said. The bell housing goes on, which is effectively the interface between the engine and the gearbox. And this complete rear end of the car just gets wheeled in and gets married up. So the car goes from looking almost like a kind of, a bare chassis to what we call a rolling chassis in about 3 weeks. Which is, and that process has evolved and got better and better and better over the years. But I think the big thing really for us that we've embraced, particularly in the last sort of 2-3 years, of course, is the whole graphene story, which started way back from my old university back at Manchester, and that's the real big technology thing that I think we've embraced. So there's 2 things there really with process and some new technology that we've embraced.
Can you tell me a bit more about that? What are you doing with graphene?
So graphene is a singular molecular layer of carbon molecules. And essentially what it does is it enhances the structural properties of carbon fiber. So think of it a little bit like adding sugar or flour into a cake mix or your coffee. And it theory enhances the flavor or the mechanical properties in this case. So what happens is the fabric, I think most people be familiar with how carbon fiber is woven as a fabric. That's made just down the road in Runcorn. And then the resin is made by Bitres, who are also just down the road. That then goes to what's called a pre-preg, a company called SHD. And what they do is they basically pre-pregnate the resin into the fabric. That gets put on a roll, and that then goes to our molder who makes the parts. With graphene, what happens is the graphene stock gets added to the resin, so that when that resin then gets pressed into the carbon as part of the pre-preg process, therefore the graphene is also in that fabric as well. So that what then happens is the molder, he doesn't know really any different. He takes the fabric, he puts it on his Gerber. The Gerber cuts out all the various different patterns. The patterns get laid up in the mold, a bit like watching your mother or your grandma baking a cake. Put all the pieces in the mold. That then goes into the autoclave and the part comes out. So really, they don't know any different whether or not it's got graphene in it or not. But the real key thing is that because it's enhanced the structural property, it means that we can reduce the numbers of layers of carbon that we've got in the part. So in some cases, we've gone from 3 down to 2 or 4 down to 3. Just depends. There's a like-for-like stiffness. And we've managed to save over 10 kilos on the body structure, which, is over 20%. So it's a huge saving. And, we're still learning about it. The more cars you make, the more we produce, the more some of the little nuances that we start to pick up on. But, generally speaking, it's a huge win-win, and not just one for the niche volume car industry. I mean, we've had conversations with people in other sectors, aerospace and so on and so forth, because it is a technology that it is scalable and it will roll out across other different sectors and help to reduce carbon emissions, ultimately, not just in cars, but aircraft, boats, you name it. So it really is a major breakthrough. And I think it's something that, from our perspective, it's innovation is the focus of what we do here, because lightweight translates immediately to a performance enhancement. for us, it's all about lightweighting, and that's why graphene has been so influential there. We've also started looking at other nanoparticle materials like niobium.
Okay. What's that?
They do what graphene does to composites in metals. So again, the same argument that you can use thinner gauge materials. So there's some really cool applications that we hope the world to be able to see in the next sort of 2 years, I think. Coming through. And it's great to be able to have, the time and the resource to be looking at these things, because it's our belief that, the world at the moment is looking for an easy fix in terms of emissions, and clearly EVs are that solution. But what you can't get around is that they still weigh 3 tons. They still weigh 2.5, 3 tons. And so the focus will still is, to be fair, as far as government is concerned, it's still on zero emissions, but also on lightweighting. Yeah. And that puts us in the hot seat to be able to get first mover advantage, but also to look at licensing out some of that IP as well to some of these people of what we've learned. And of course, with the volumes that we do, and we will be doing in 2 and 3 years' time, that means someone like a McLaren or a Bentley or an Aston Martin or a Ferrari will say, hey, 150 cars a year. Okay, we could maybe put that on the next TDF, or we could maybe put that on the next LT, and that's beginning to attract interest.
Do you 3D print stuff?
Actually, we do, yes. And if this laptop was mobile, I could actually show you the 3D printer that's printing. So, the 3D printed story for most of your listeners would be familiar with what we would call rapid prototyping. So, engineer or designer has an idea. They want to see what the part's going to look like. They don't want to go to all the expense of us tooling a part and making a part and it taking weeks, months. They want to have a part here and now. So, 3D printing's been around for a long time. The problem is the materials didn't support those parts to be used in series production. They just didn't have any strength. Yeah. Well, there's been some major breakthroughs in 3D printed materials, and we work with a partner called DSM in Holland and Ultimaker, who make the machines. They now have carbon-filled materials. So that means that you're getting the structure that carbon fiber gives you. In fact, in some cases, it's stronger than carbon fiber. And there's no tooling. There's infinite flexibility of future change, of us making design revisions if needed. No tooling cost. There's obviously the cost of the machine, and there's obviously the cost of the materials, but like for like, it's significantly cheaper, and it means that the parts are lighter, and it means that we've got this flexibility of change. So our 3D printing never stops. Actually, it's starting a print job that's taken 3.5 days, and already scheduled the next 2 weeks worth of work on it. And it's great because when you're sleeping at night, this thing's working, of course. And that's the other thing that you don't get with a CNC machined parts. Human beings have to go to bed, and machines have to be switched off, and so on. So great bit of innovation that we've very much embraced, and I think it's very BAC, I think, as well. Yeah.
Can they churn out multiple parts without anyone else being involved now? Or do you do one part and then have to reset it up?
I mean, it purely depends on the type of 3D printed machine. Okay, the machine that we have, you can print multiple parts on it. For the level of fidelity and quality in terms of surface finish and things like that, we're using it to make inlet system for the engine for Mono R as an example. It has to be super, super, super refined, because that's what the air sees going into the engine. But to answer your question, we will just make one part at a time on that particular machine. But there are bigger machines that are several hundreds of thousands of pounds, and you can nest 30, 40 parts in there. Yeah. So it just depends on the size of your investment and the size of your machine. And just depends on your volume aspirations. So we've got what suits us for now. But we also work with one of our local partners who prints about 30 parts at a time in one of his machines. But the investment for that is 7 figures.
Yeah, it must be so good for the design and sort of engineering side of it, of being able to just, that doesn't quite work, change it.
Absolutely. I mean, before Goodwood and Geneva, we were literally, it was designed on a Monday and a Tuesday, set the print job on a Wednesday, it was on the car on a Friday, and it's amazing. And, credit to what we've managed to achieve here with this in this building that I sit in. This is what we call it the BAC Innovation Centre. It's right next door to the BAC Manufacturing Centre. It's another 11,000 square foot facility. And we sit in an innovation office, and literally through the door is what we call our design, our innovation studio. It's effectively a pilot hall where we build the first cars. So the innovation team are right next to it. And in that room, in that space, is where the 3D printer is. So it's actually closer to the design team than the printer is to print emails and drawings, actually. But I think that's a sign of the times, you know. And the cost of these things is coming down all the time. It's more accessible to kids in schools and universities, and it just creates a different way of thinking. It's fantastic. It really is, particularly with these new structural materials. I would have
had a whale of a time at school if I could have 3D printed stuff, because making the objects that you can 3D print, like there's loads you just can't make, but having a bit of experience in machining stuff and stuff like that, it just takes forever to do something by hand.
It does. I think the other thing is, you know, depending on your age and your experience, you tend to have a somewhat shackled approach to design, because you're designing something thinking, how am I going to make it? If you just design it based on what you want, and not have to worry about that, which is actually quite a blinkered approach, actually, to just say, I'm not going to worry about how I'm going to make it. Then it just means other things are possible. And it really is a breath of fresh air for us. It's not been easy, you know. I mean, it's not as if you just make something and you press go. There's about 30 different parameters on the machine, from the material, how the material is dried, under what temperature, for how long, the feed rates of the material, the thermal control for the actual 3D printing machine, nozzle sizes, nozzle profiles, you know, all these things affect the result in terms of surface finish, quality, etc. So it's classic R&D stuff, but we're now at a stage where, you know, the innovation team are handing it over to the production team. And it's great. It's a great thing for us, because yes, we produce a car, but we don't do any CNC or molding or grinding or cutting. You know, we assemble final parts to our design, and this is the first time we're actually going to make our own parts. Yeah, and it's really exciting, as you can probably tell.
What about? Okay, tell me about your wheels, because I feel like a lot goes into your wheels to make them light.
Yeah, so you know, the holy grail of weight save really is reciprocating unsprung mass, which are the wheels and the discs, obviously. About 2014, as part of a government R&D grant, we designed, with Surface Transform's local partner, our carbon ceramic discs, and we reduced the weight of the steel brakes by 50%, from 5 kilos down to 2.5. It's huge savings. Yeah. About the same time, we started to think that the exterior of the car needed a lift. We'd had the standard alloy wheel, which was the lightest 17-inch wheel in the world from OZ in Italy. And we started to work with Dymac, and working with them on their concept of a 2-piece wheel. You remember you said that you were, back at university, you were a frustrated engineer or school. Well, you remember I equals mr squared, which is all about moments of inertia calculations. So the best place to save the weight on the wheel is the extreme circumference of the wheel, and that's why it's made of carbon. But because carbon isn't particularly strong in bending, you'll notice on all carbon wheels, the spokes tend to be quite thick section to get the stiffness that they need for the axial bending when the car's cornering. So for us, what we say is we use the right material in the right area. We use the carbon for the rim, and we use a 6000 series forged billet machined centerpiece. And that was our original, what we call our carbon hybrid option wheel. That is 2 kilos lighter than the alloy wheel, which we thought was a huge step forward. And
what does that weigh? Like a kilo?
No. So I'm going to have to do this math in my head. The current carbon hybrid option wheel weighs 7.8 kilos. Okay. Yes. 7 kilos. A front, that is. And the front alloy wheel was about 9. So super light. Yeah. 9 down to 7. But of course, not content with that, and supported as always by our software partner, Autodesk, who have this amazing software amongst the many different softwares that we use in our product development suite and design suite of softwares, which is called generative design. And what generative design does, it basically takes all your load cases, it takes all of your spatial constraints, and it does many times. It does an FEA analysis whilst it's designing it. So rather than a designer saying, or an engineer saying, here's my wheel, let's do some FEA analysis. The analysis comes back and you get some red areas and some green areas. And you think, I'll take some weight out of here, or I'll add it here, whatever. It's doing this hundreds of times. because Autodesk software also is the software that writes the program path for the machining, it's constantly checking, can I make it?
Okay.
Where's my, what's the stress distribution looking like? In addition to that, you can constrain surfaces to say, no, our design team really like the 5-spoke.
Yeah.
And they really like this particular surface. So don't touch these areas, but you can touch other areas.
Yeah.
And so the wheel that we launched on the new generation Mono at Geneva Pool is 1.25 kilos lighter than the current carbon hybrid wheel. And so it's 4.8 kilos. That's lighter than a Formula One 13-inch wheel, right? So it's really, it's not what we don't call it lightweight anymore. It's ultra lightweighting is what it is. And we're not done with it there either. We'll even the valve is lighter as well, which is I think it's 10 grams. I think the valve is lighter.
So presumably you start now applying this process to the rest of the car in the bits that you can do it with.
You're absolutely right. And so what you have to know, first of all, is you have to know your loads. You have to know your load cases. Yeah. And what's interesting is we add more power and the car ultimately gets faster, then you're adding in more load. So, we have to manage expectations there of getting lighter and lighter and lighter because we're going faster and faster and faster as well. So we have to manage that. But ultimately, you're absolutely right. We're on this journey with Autodesk, watch this space, but there are other areas on the car that we're targeting. The wheel is a great thing because it's very visual. And sometimes generative design can throw up these kind of very nature-inspired structures. Yeah. You probably saw it at Geneva last year on the Bugatti. And so for us, having that aesthetic constraint in there was really interesting. Yeah. But something like a bell housing, as an example, that you don't even see. Yeah. There's no real aesthetic challenges with that. There's a manufacturing challenge, of course, of how you're going to cast it. And then other areas in the car as well. So that's exactly what we're going to do over the next 12 months. So lots and lots to talk about in the future. When you press go on that, like the first time, you've put in your wheel, you've defined the surfaces, whatever, and you're like, right, run. the thing that comes back, is it you just look at it and go like, oh, what the hell, that's mental, or you sort of expect it, or presumably it gets a bit interesting? It gets very interesting. You probably have to bleep over some of the words that we it's why we come to work every day. You're inspired by a new software, working with great people. Of course, the guys at Autodesk are fantastic, as are the guys at Dymag as well. They've always got appetite for pushing the boundaries. And of course, the minute you get this first picture off the guy who's machining them, and it's like this viral image that just spreads all around the company. Everyone's like, oh my God, it's like WTF type moment, And then of course, when they come here and you're used to seeing them, it's being able to look at them and, in this case, we've taken a lot of visual mass out around the centerpiece. You can actually stick your fingers through the spokes. And then, of course, you put it on the car and it all just comes to life then. Everything just looks, that's so much thinner, that's so much cleaner. And it's really in line with the new form language of the new generation Mono, where all the surfaces have got a thinness to them, very much like an athlete, where you can see his muscles underneath. You just see the skin that's all tucked over all these nicely defined muscles. Very much nature inspired again. So it works really well with the car. So you go from a component in isolation to a system with it mounted on a tire, and then you put it on the car, and then the car's on the ground, and it just all comes together. Which, presumably, some of these pieces come back, and that in theory they should be strong enough. But then the first time you put them, test them, do you go? Well, that's why we put Ollie Webb in the car, isn't it? No joking aside. No, I mean that's what engineering is, isn't it? Yeah. And these analysis tools that we have. And listen, we're not involved in motorsport here. We're not racing. We're not competing against anybody else. So there's a significant factor of safety that's always put into these things. If you could take that out and do what guys in Formula One do or any other motorsport, you could go way further. So we always have to err on the side of caution and then some from a safety perspective. So no, it's more of a question actually of I know what that will feel like in terms of, because I remember when we test drove the carbon hybrid wheel for the first time, the gyroscopic effect in terms of a change of direction. It's instantaneously noticeable when you turn into a corner particularly with changes of direction. So turn into a corner, chicanes and so on and so forth. You really notice the difference. So we're expecting to be able to feel that. And that's the next exciting thing.
Yeah.
Once you've designed something, you've seen it as a component, as a system, and then on the car, it's how does it feel? Because ultimately that's what it's about. It's about making a car drive as well as it looks, which I kind of guess is my job really to try and, I can't take any credit for the way the car looks. Of course, I look at it and say, I like things more than others and as part of the process, but I can't take any credit for it. But for me to try and make the car drive as well as it looks, that's the brief on the highest level. And you've driven it, and you'll drive the new one and you'll see what you think. It's next level again, along with various other different modifications that we've made for weight distribution and other things.
So, okay, we started off with the first mono, which evolved a bit, and then you did the R.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Well, yeah. So there's the three different iterations of the first car that we made, and then we launched Mono R at Goodwood. Yeah, last year.
And what were the changes to the R? What's the sort of focus of the R? How's it different to a normal one?
Yeah. So Mono R effectively was the launch for the new aesthetic that you see now on the car that was launched at Geneva Pool. So it's this move towards this declutter across the front end. You'll notice the lights is the biggest change, the shark front nose. Every panel's been redesigned. But the thing with the R is that we knew from a product planning perspective it was going to be the last hurrah for normally aspirated, purely for meeting emission regulations. And that engine, I have to say, is an incredible achievement, not just for an SME like ourselves and Mount Tune, who are about a similar size company, but for any company in the world, it's 137 brake horsepower per litre in terms of specific output. So it's 4-cylinder, normally aspirated. It's 2.5 again, but it's 343 brake horsepower out of a 2.5 litre engine. It's as trick as it gets. It really is. Yeah. And that's why we're only making 30 of them for the lucky people who've bought them. So it's a new record for specific output. And the previous record holder was the 458 Speciale, one of the best cars of all time, in my opinion. So really pushing the boundaries. It revs to 9,000 RPM, billet crank, all forged internals, complete new inlet system with what we lovingly call the bazooka on the side, which is is the thing that defines the car. But I have to say it works. It works, and it effectively. For your listeners, if you picture it, if you think back to sort of 70s and 80s Formula One cars where they had these big air scoops, what you're doing there is you're scooping air into the engine, you're forcing air or ramming air into the engine, as we call it. The more air you can put in, the more fuel you can put in, and the more power you can make. That's if you can rev the engine higher, of course, which we now do with the billet crank and the 9,000 RPM. So that's how we get the power output that we're producing, and that's why the car looks the way that it looks, and it definitely defines the car. Your listeners will see it on social media, or they'll see it on the road shortly. So
yeah, it's definitely noticeable. It's a cool feature of that car for sure.
Yeah.
Like the ram air effect. Like, what sort of power gain do you get over at like what sort of speed? Like 100 miles an hour?
Yeah, no, that's a very clever question. So what happens is as your speed increases, obviously the pressure increases, and that's where it's essential to be working with the people that we do and at Mount Tune and our friends at Specialist Components who make the ECU, who do a lot of our mapping work, is to make sure that you're putting the right amount of fuel in as the air pressure is getting higher at higher speed. But to put it into perspective, the faster you go, the more power you're making. It's that simple. Of course, the faster you go, the aerodynamic drag that you're creating is also fighting against you the faster you go. So, and in theory, you just keep going faster and faster and faster, which of course you can't. And that's why the top speed of Mono R is about the same top speed as the current car, because the drag off the airbox and pressurizing that air has an effect at the VMAX. So VMAX is about the same at around 170, but obviously it's incredibly quick. I mean, it's less than 5.5 seconds to 100 miles an hour, and it just keeps on pulling and pulling and pulling. It's mega exciting to drive. It's on another level altogether. but you can drive it around town. It's still as usable as a mono ever was.
The car, when you look at it just generally, you go, oh, people will use that on track. Now, presumably, you haven't designed it just for track. And I know you guys have taken him on some big road trips. Where's the sort of longest distance you've driven in a mono, or you guys have taken a mono?
Well, it's interesting because the brief wasn't that the car looked like a Formula One car, or looked like a Group C car, or that it looked like a normal road car that had been molded into a GT car, if you like. It needed to look as home on the road as it did on the track, a bit like the Panigale Superbike we mentioned earlier. But in terms of road trips, wow, I mean, some of our customers have done some fairly incredible things. The chairman of the Mono Owners Club, who's based in Stuttgart in Germany, he's done over 20,000 kilometers on the road with his car without a helmet, right? So he prides himself on never using a helmet. But most of our customers use the car on the road and track. There are some who use them just on the track, particularly in the US, where it's a very long drive to get to a race resort or a circuit. But by and large, people drive them on the road. One of our customers whose car is actually in build right now for Mono R, he lives in Holland, northern Holland. And we did an event in Italy, and he drove his Mono from Holland all the way down to Milan for a private tour of the Pirelli factory, of course, make our tyres, the R&D facility there. He did a 4-day driving event, which included a track day, and then drove all the way back home to Northern Holland. So, we have some real core.
Fair play.
Exactly.
What did he do for luggage? Presumably he couldn't carry it all.
Well, I mean, there's 70 cubic litres of storage space in the front of the car, which is enough for your listeners. I'd say that's a reasonable size weekend backpack. The idea is that you put that in the front, and when you get out at night to your hotel, you whip it out, take your helmet and steering wheel off, and you lock them in the front. Tonneau cover on there, job done. So, listen, the car's it's as practical as it can be for what it's intended. And it's great to see our customers doing that, actually, because that was always the vision.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, is making memories in these things.
Yeah, it is. And I have to say, kudos to the Owners Club. They organise some great events, as indeed we do. The one that you attended in Spa was one of those. We usually team up with other people on track days as well. And, again, looking forward for this time that we find ourselves in at the moment, to get that out of the way and to start kicking on with some nice events in the UK, Europe and beyond. Yeah.
It's actually quite a good car for social distancing. You can't have a passenger.
It's the perfect car for social distance, isn't it? Or selfish solitude, as we call it. It is. And like all things that you do on your own, it's great to go running or snowboarding or skiing or cycling or horseback riding on your own. But of course, there's a nice solitude to that as well. But it's great to do it with a bunch of people. There's nothing better to see, 10 or 12 monos thrashing around the Isle of Man, over the mountain road or through the Black Forest or Italy, or it's great, and it's massively rewarding for Ian and I and anyone associated with the company to see it, because I say to everyone who works here, we're not in the car business, we're in the entertainment business. We're here to put smiles on people's faces, and that's what we do.
Yeah. Do any owners have two?
Do any owners have two? They don't own two cars. Well, the chap I just mentioned, he will keep his current car when he gets delivery of his R. So there will be people who have two cars. Yeah. What we find is there's not many second-hand cars because the owners don't want to get rid of them for one. Yeah. And it's quite tribal, I've got to say. The owners have got a real interesting profile. I think a lot of them are entrepreneurs, self-made in most cases. They kind of see what we're doing and kind of bucking the trend of sort of car companies, if you like. And I think because of our size and the personalities involved, I think we're a very personal business. And they love that. They like being able to be part of something and part of our journey. And it's great having them along. And a lot of them actually, they're successful and very interesting people. So it's nice to hear how they've achieved their success. Yeah. Nobody wrote the book about how to start a car company, so we're always learning and we're always listening. So we always try our best.
What have been some of the biggest sort of struggles along the way, or interesting stories, or things you've got to sort of push through that you wouldn't necessarily anticipate?
Without making it completely topical, I'd say this this whole COVID-19 thing is within the space of 2 weeks, I think, when it really, really, really flared up, and the government's announced lockdown. We had our own kind of policies here internally, and we don't really struggle with space in here anyway. With 22,000 square foot and 20 odd people, we've got plenty of space. But the problem, of course, was our suppliers. They were just literally closing down. Then what do you do with staff? And literally on an hour by hour basis, it was kind of crisis management. But you've just got to approach it with a level head and just try and do what's appropriate, do what's right. Say that you've made the right decisions by and large over the last sort of 10, 11 years since we started the company. I think we've made the right decisions with the people who are either working from home or furloughed. And we've got, a skeleton staff in here at the moment, and the project team who are involved with Mono are. And other than driving home and not seeing any cars on the road, it's a real weird feeling. It doesn't seem as if daily business has changed that much.
Yeah.
But the reality is that it has. And, whenever life gets back to normal, whatever normal will look like. So I think that's probably been the biggest challenge, because everything else, Sam, is just what I call work.
Yeah.
Certainly designing the car is when you've got the skilled people that we've got, and we've been doing it as long as we have. Before BAC and during BAC, work is work, So if you, it's not as if any problem is insurmountable. There's always a solution there. I think the biggest challenge for us has actually been to try and run a business that's continually expanding. We're across 40 countries now in terms of exports, which is just ridiculous. Is to try and keep doing what's appropriate for a business that's continually growing, making sure that we don't get too ambitious with some of the things that we're doing, and making sure we look after our customers first and foremost, and our employees, and of course our suppliers. So,
yeah. Do you get a lot? At the moment, we're sort of in this funny stage, and we've had some motor shows cancelled, and then the sort of chat of whether actually people will go back to motor shows again. Anyway, as a manufacturer, do you get a lot out of certain motor shows? Do you go to a lot, or how do you sort of see it panning out in the future, and what works for you guys?
I mean, I got to say, you spoke about some of the setbacks. I'd say with COVID was one, but I think arguably the biggest disappointment of my entire professional career was what happened with Geneva, and it was absolutely the right decision. Don't get me wrong, but you design a show car to be shown at a show, and it's a point in time. There's a lot of investment and energy that goes into it with everyone in the company, and I'm not going to say that for us, it doesn't matter whether there'll be a motor show at Geneva next year. That absolutely has to be in my mind. And our stand was, strategically placed opposite Ferrari and McLaren, because that's the kind of guy who buys our cars. We had so much business lined up to do, great business. And, I wasn't just disappointed for us. I was disappointed for our suppliers who'd supported us and some cases worked over Christmas and New Year. I was disappointed for our employees as well, because being so close to Liverpool Airport here, when we can see the runway from here, we can walk to the EasyJet check-in like 5 minutes. We had every single employee on a day trip to come out there and in a non-working capacity to say, just go and have a look, walk around the show and be part of, feel proud and feel proud of the fact that we're rubbing shoulders with these incredible brands at this show. And that was, so it was hugely disappointed. Now when I think about it, I'm still, I think I've got over it, but actually I haven't. I don't think I will until we kind of have our pound of flesh in that sense. But to answer your question, I think we still need good events like Goodwood Festival of Speed, like the Geneva Auto Show, whether it's Villa d'Este. I mean, you go to a lot of these great things, you know what they are. I think we absolutely do. This is great, of course it is, and it's something new. But I think what this situation will do is open up our eyes to other things, but I don't think it will say that it's only one solution. And for sure, if Geneva happens next year and they're fair about the cancellation, then I think most people will go back, I think. But I mean, Goodwood traditionally has been, for the last 5 years, has been our major investment for most of our marketing budget. And that's probably gone too commercial, I think, probably now. And certainly at that price point, you can go and have a 2-week show at Geneva and be positioned in amongst all the manufacturers, and not just the local dealer who's part of a show. It's part of the major manufacturer. It's Ferrari Italy who put on their stand. It's Bentley from Crewe put that stand. So you're not just rubbing shoulders with these brands. You're rubbing shoulders with the top people in these companies. And of course, there's conversations to be had and customers to do business with. So I think yes, absolutely, they will happen. What do you think? What's your thoughts?
I think, for me, I think it's much more important for smaller brands like yourselves that sell high-end cars. I think of people I know, like let's say companies like Koenigsegg, Pagani, let's say you guys, Roof, someone like that, Geneva. I know a ton of people that go to Geneva and it's their one show of the year and they go to look at all the cars and they buy cars. And the smaller companies, you are meeting your customers like that are going to buy cars. Whereas if you're Ford or something, like people don't go to the show to buy a car. But I'm pretty sure someone like you guys must take tons of deposits at Geneva, maybe at Goodwood, and then the rest of the year sort of, works itself out. But they're major events for those companies. But I love the show. But I love the show because I go and I talk to everyone and I talk to people from the manufacturers. And like you said, it's getting everyone in one place, whether it's Goodwood or whatever. And you can see all the people you want to see in 2 days. Whereas to go and see them, you've got to fly to different parts of the world to go and see everyone. And then obviously I get to see all the cars and whatever. But just as like a Joe Public type person, to fly to Geneva to go and see the cars is not, it's a good day, but it's not particularly interesting. I'd prefer something like Festival of Speed, where you see everything moving, people that put straight pipes on their car, you see them sliding around, it's like someone like Ollie's just like tuning up the hill. That for me is way more important as like a normal person experiencing these things.
Yeah, I think, in an ideal world for us, we'd do a mixture of both events like that. And certainly next year, that's maybe what we'll be looking at, actually. I definitely agree with your point about, the kind of high net worth individual who goes and buys a car, because he'll say, I'm going to do my car shopping for the next 2 or 3 years, and I'm going to go to Geneva, and I'm going to go on the Ferrari stand, I'm going on the Lamborghini and the Porsche stand and the McLaren stand. Oh, what's this? Oh, wow, I never even knew you guys existed. Oh, I've seen you for so many years, but I've never had the opportunity to come and say hi. And you know what? Every time Goodwood is around, it's always a bit difficult for me to get to it or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're the kind of customers that we've missed out this year on. But we can't cry in our beer for too long. If it goes ahead next year, we'll be there and we'll do some great business there as well. But I agree with you that, particularly for our car, to see, hear, smell, look, see the excitement around these cars, it's also interesting as well. So, long live events like Goodwood and Shelsley and things like that. But also I think Geneva and New York Auto Show also is pretty good as well. And selected auto shows around the world. I still think they'll happen, is my personal feeling.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think we're going to change drastically. I'm sure a lot of companies will look at it and go, ooh, there's a certain amount for me as a consumer of all of these new cars getting dumped onto the internet on one day. I think it's just stupid. Like it's not great. Quite often people have rubbish photos, which some people will say is, oh, that's because you then need to go and see the car. But if I see a rubbish photo, I don't necessarily want to go and see the car.
I think there's everyone's vying for the same column space or Instagram posts, aren't they? And it's like, it's another new car and another new car and another new car. I don't know what cars. I mean, obviously we've seen some new cars that were launched and what we would have kind of been, in that cauldron of new cars being launched. But that's why I think new car launches will take a different approach. I don't think it will be cover comes off at Geneva necessarily. I do think car shows will be part of a marketing mix moving forward of how that's done. Yeah. Because I do still think you need that big show element for all the reasons that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, definitely. The unveiling, they always leak anyway now. Like, it's very difficult for people not to have these photos leak. And then you've seen some really weird stuff with some companies chasing down the people that leaked it. And it's like, it might be one of their customers who's just shared it with some mates.
Yeah.
And then they go and like harangue them. They're like, this is not what you do to your customers. They don't appreciate it. Right. Can we get onto the new car?
Yes, of course. Let's.
So tell me about the new car.
So the new Mono, which was launched at Geneva Pool, and just a word on Geneva Pool, we kind of combined Geneva with Liverpool, and we held an event here in our innovation studio, and we turned it into a kind of mini auto show. The 3 cars that should have been on the stand were on there. The new car specifically, it takes the same aesthetic of the new reference of our design DNA, if you like, which was first shown on Mono R at Goodwood last year. And that specifically is all about this efficiency in the surfacing. So every body panel has changed. It still looks like a Mono. Of course, it does, like a 911, just looks like a 911. But every panel has changed. The height of the car's been reduced by 15 millimeters, a complete declutter around the front end. The engine makes more power, therefore it needs more cooling. So therefore the radiators need to be bigger. And how do you, and what do they need? They need more air. How do you do that? You reduce frontal area. But we've embraced that and made this kind of sharks feature at the front of the car. We've gone from 4 lighting elements down to 2 with the centrally mounted sort of Le Mans GTE class inspired main beams, which are in the nose of the car. Because they're there, we've had to relocate the battery, which is for polar moment of inertia reasons is now closer to the driver, which helps with weight distribution. But in essence, that whole design DNA is all new. Some really trick lights on there. It also uses the graphene technology, which we pioneered with Mono R. So again, significant weight saving. But I think the biggest headline on the car is the forced induction engine. So it's the first time in our history we've moved away from naturally aspirated to forced induction. And again, working hand in glove with our friends and colleagues at Mount Tune. So the engine is a 2.3 litre forced induction engine, produces 332 brake horsepower, over 400 Newton meters of torque, which is quite staggering.
What's that up from the previous?
Well, it's up from 300 and 320 Newton meters, so it's a big bump in torque. So we've obviously got things like uprated drive shafts, wheel bearings, gearboxes uprated as well to handle the additional torque, and then of course all of the plumbing that is associated with a turbo car, because of course most turbocharged cars are usually front engined or rear end or mid engined, which means that you can take air in at one end. You can cool it, goes to the engine, turbocharger, force it in, and then obviously exhaust gases. It's quite easy to package. But for us, having the engine longitudinally mounted, it's quite complicated with air passing, all around. And then you've got, of course, the water radiators and intercoolers and so on. We've come up with a real neat package, which I'm very, very pleased with. So in essence, where the Mono R bazooka is on the side of the car, that aperture in the bodywork is where the inlet for the turbo is. And so other than that, the exterior of the car almost looks identical actually to Mono R. But I think the big challenge with that car is the first time that we've worked with a turbocharged engine. Of course, it's very well understood by David and the guys at Mount Tune. But being able to give the car that BAC DNA of the way the power is delivered with this progressive power delivery, that kind of normally aspirated feel. And I think, you look at the way McLaren do it, you look at the way Ferrari do it, particularly with the 488. You go and drive a 488, people say, wow, it just feels like a naturally aspirated car. That's all about how the torque is managed at the lower RPM and is progressive. And we've done the same with that car.
That was going to be my question, is like, how have you structured the power delivery? And you've aimed for a sort of normally aspirated-esque, smooth, drivable profile.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not completed yet. There's some work we'll be doing this summer as part of the sign-off and the emission sign-off process in Germany. But, early signs are very positive at this stage that it will feel like a Mono. It's quite interesting because there's, we spoke about the vibration, the higher rev an engine, obviously you've got, predominantly second and fourth order resonances that dominate with a 4-cylinder engine. And they change on a turbocharged car massively. So, it may well be that refinement that some of our customers have been looking for will come with the turbocharged. So it could be a win-win in that respect.
And then you'll get all the turbo.
Yeah, well,
noises.
There you go. Yeah, and of course the clack it's going to be quite the orchestral symphony going down the road with turbos whistling and popping and gear shifts. So yeah, that's exciting.
When will the first customer cars be delivered?
So Q3 2021. So just over 12 to 14 months now. Yeah. Yeah. So first cars already pre-sold, a nice handful of those, which is good, to places like Hong Kong, Japan, UK, America. But of course, the main target market for that was mainland Europe, because mainland Europe is pretty hard to penetrate from an emission perspective, particularly Germany, Italy, Belgium, Holland, Spain, France, etc. Those key markets for us, and pretty much on our doorstep as well. Really, it's not a 12-hour flight around the world somewhere to go and meet our customers. It's pretty local. So that's the big excitement, really, is how we can further develop the business and increase the annual volumes.
Who do you see as your biggest competitor?
It's an interesting one. Anything that is being bought in the luxury goods sector, I guess, is probably, nobody buys a mono instead of another car. Yeah, it's not as if you're going to buy this car or A or B. You buy it in addition to. And so in that sense, it's not as if someone says, well, I'm going to buy a mono or I'm going to buy something else. It's no, I see and I want it. They might say, well, actually, for that money, I might want the latest Richard Mille watch, or I might want another Richard Mille watch, or I might want an upgrade for, I need to buy the wife a nice horse or whatever. I mean, these guys are, they're male, first of all. I haven't got a lady owner yet. They're male. They are typically between sort of 30 and 60. They're successful entrepreneurs. They like nice things. They like the performance. They like the appearance of the car. They like to drive it on the road. They like to drive it on the track. And so for them, they're looking at the cars that they've got and they're saying, do I really need 5 or 6 two-seat GT supercars? They kind of all do the same job. So maybe I might cull a little bit and get rid of 1 or 2, but that's just part of a cleansing process. We call it right tool for the right job. And we're just shining a torch down a rabbit hole for people to say, hey, this car will do this job. You go back to the original things we were chatting about at the start of the talk. Do you really want to be taking a LaFerrari or these £1 million cars on track and just run the risk of the thing going wrong?
Not for me.
But people could also say, well, your car's 200 grand. I don't want to do it with your car either. But for these guys, it's the right tool for the right job. And, this thing's lapping Silverstone not that much slower than, or about the same speed as a GT car at €800,000. The running costs.
What's a Silverstone lap time?
Well, Mono R is going to be pretty close. We haven't done it yet. We've ran prototypes a couple of years ago around there on slicks, and it was 4 or 5 seconds quicker than a Senna.
So what's that? 2.2 something like that?
2:10. Chris Harris did in the first Senna that was delivered.
Yeah.
And Mr. Webb was doing 2 minutes 4, 2 minutes 5 in what was really a hybrid between the current car and Mono R. I think he'll get close to 2, which that's block band GT car lap times, €800,000.
That's quick.
It is, isn't it?
Have you had a lot of struggles with tyres over the years, being a car that's so light?
That's a great question. Actually, not. No. I mean, we met the guys from Kumho many years ago through a connection at Manchester United. Funny enough, they sponsored Man United, and they were very keen to. They were very active in. They sponsored the European F3 Championship, and they were very keen to make use of their marketing activities in motorsport onto the road. And their performance tyre range, they made 2 versions for us because of our weight, and they did what we call our soft and our super soft variants. And we've had a great relationship with Kumho, and the tyre's been great. But over 2.5 years ago, we met Pirelli. You mentioned shows earlier. It was actually at the Autosport show we met them. And they came to us and said, hey, listen, we need to talk about a collaboration. Mono R gets as a standard fit, as indeed the new generation Mono does, a bespoke front and rear version of their Trofeo R road tyre, which is just incredible. And bearing in mind, legislation is getting harder and harder and harder to meet with things like rolling resistance and tyre noise and all these things, just for environmental good reasons. And to be able to produce a tyre that's got at least the same performance as the old Kumho, but within all those more restrictive constraints is a brilliant effort. It's ever so flattering for us that they are interested in working with such a small company as ourselves. when really from a business case perspective, it's, the volumes are not even worth talking about compared to the normal levels of volume. But it's their motorsport department that we're working with. The tyres are made in the same facilities, the F1 and F2 tyres in Turkey. It's that access of the engineers. And for them, it was all about the technical challenge. It was how do we get this performance in this tyre and for a vehicle that only weighs this level of, and we spoke about lightweighting earlier and why we're at the forefront of innovation, because some of the solutions that we're driving, who knows, in 5, 10, 15 years time, when vehicle weights are being driven down all the time, with some of this know-how that's baked into some of those solutions. But Pirelli have been an absolute joy to work with. They were and still are. They're a fantastic bunch of people, and the tyre is it's fantastic. And not only do we have the Trofeo R tyre, which you can use, of course, on the road or the track, but we also have a bespoke slick tyre now and an extreme wet tyre. And the great thing is that all of those 3 sizes are interchangeable, so it doesn't compromise the ride height or the pitch of the car when you change all of those different tyres.
Do you have to adjust the suspension much for in between those, or not really?
No, not at all. No. So cambers all remain the same. There's very cunningly, when you go from the road tyre to the slick tyre, it lowers the car by 5 mil and gives it 3 mil more rake, which is what you'd want when you go on track. So it's been great. They're really good, fantastic bunch of people, and it's a mega tyre as well.
Something that I've always wondered, when you get a bespoke tyre, like let's say for my GT3, you have to get an N-rated N1 or whatever, Cup 2R or something, whatever they're called. And how does that, let's say your tyre, your Trofeo R, differ to just like, I say just a Trofeo R, but I don't know whether they're all bespoke. But let's say you put the McLaren tyre on the mono.
Yeah.
How different is it? And like, how different, like, what do you feel it? Like, how does it work?
So the short answer is and Pirelli won't want reminding of this. We went through 16 different iterations of front and rear tyre. So first of all, because of the cornering forces involved that the car generates, they had to completely redesign the sidewall of the tyre, of course, again, because of the forces. The compound of the tyre is changed dramatically, which is relatively easy in tyre development terms. But the way the construction of the tyre is, the way all of the various different layers are made up, was completely different. So the fact that it says Trofeo R on the sides is about the only thing that links it to other Trofeos. And what's great is, and it's a shame that your listeners are listening to this and they can't see it, but they'll see it on our Instagram page if they go look, is that it's got mono written on the sidewall, on the sidewall of the tyre. So there's always that easily weight, a bit like you spoke about your speed rating on your tyres. And it was great, there was myself, Ollie Webb and Anthony Reid, who we did a lot of development at Anglesey mega circuit that you know well. And we spent many a day up there testing back to back. And that's what engineering is, it's great. Yeah. Those days are great. And Anglesey's a mega place to just have one mono and the red arrows, testing up above, around the island of Anglesey. Cool. They're the better days, they are, for sure.
That's one of those things that I've always sort of wanted to do, because you get, let's say, a company like yours, and they say, okay, we've done a new set of brakes, or the wheels are 3 kilos lighter or whatever, but you only ever get to drive the one with the carbon ceramics or the one in that setup. You never get to back-to-back different tyres or back-to-back different setups on the same car or same spec car, same day, same place, to really get a feeling of how they're different. And when people sometimes ask me, like, what's the difference between carbon ceramic brakes or normal brakes and blah, 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 and you're like, better.
Yeah.
But like, I can't tell you in specifics because I haven't been able to drive all of the exact stuff, the same car back to back. It's quite a rare thing to be able to do now, actually. Well, obviously, as an engineer, you do it all day long.
Yeah, and that's why we have a process where you start off with the baseline and then you just make various different step changes so you can always compare. But what I do think is great, and it's a great feature that we've got on the car, is the adjustable suspension. So you can adjust the bump and the rebound on the dampers. And depending on, so the car leaves the factory with factory settings on it. And we have recommendations for certain drivers if the car's doing certain things in certain situations, or if people have preferences that they want more front end, more rotation or whatever. And the look on people's faces, and when, you know, and then of course that's the conversation in the bar at night. Did you put those extra 4 clicks on?
And then you mess with them, and you'd be like, yeah. Completely softened off the rear.
And then you see all these women just running for cover because there's all these blokes sat around talking damper settings and clicks on their dampers and stuff. But no, it's a sign of a good car that you make a small change like that and you can feel it. Yeah. And I think it's part of the attraction as well, is that they get to learn the car as the kind of factory setting, and they then get to tailor it and get quicker and quicker as they get more and more used to the car. You know, you can grow with the car like any sport. You know, like say for example skiing, you start off on a blue run and then you end up on a red run or a black run or off piste or whatever. Yeah. And it's the same with cycling and any other other single person sports. You know, and it's a challenge, and I think our customers like that actually. You know.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's actually one of the things I really like about playing car games on like a PlayStation or something, because you can mess with all these damper settings and stuff, and it is the same as if you've done the change on a car in the real world. So you can I can experiment with changing settings and getting a vague feel for how it changes. Because if I'm in my Radical, for example, I'll come back in and they'll be like, okay, well, what do you want to change, or do you want to change anything? How's the car feel? And my first question is, well, I don't 100% know whether I'm driving it correctly to start with. So like we could start changing stuff, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's certainly something that we've thought about. We don't want to overpower people with too many things that you can change on a car. And I think it's important that people understand, like you say, how you're actually driving the car, because you could be changing gear at the wrong time. You could be braking too late into a corner that's causing the car to be unsettled at the rear, for example. There's lots of different things. And so we try and encourage people to be able to repeat what they're doing, because they might not drive the same from one lap to the next, as you probably know yourself. So, and I think that in itself is what part of the ownership experience, as we spoke about skiing and snowboarding and cycling and things, is that you're more aware that you need to be thinking about what you're doing, beyond this changing gear and sawing at the wheel. You need to try and step back a little bit and try and suck it in and say, right, okay, so what am I actually doing? Where am I braking? When am I changing gear? And break a corner down into 4 or 5 different elements and get better at it, because these guys know when they get better, they'll go quicker and they'll have more fun. Yeah. So that's part of the education, I think, that they enjoy.
Yeah. Do you do like a driver training program or anything like that?
It's definitely something which we're looking to develop and do, certainly be more active with it. The guys, usually when we do an experience event, the one you came to on Spa, we'll also use it as an opportunity for people to do test drives who are looking to buy, and we do a lead follow scenarios. And in that case, there's quite a bit of interaction with the lead driver. What we want to try and get to now is that we've got customers who also bring their cars on those days. So it's a nice community, but we want them to be in a position where they can start bouncing things off drivers. Usually there's a good relationship with some of the technicians, but it's nice to have a personality, and an Ollie Webb or Adam Chrysler-Duda as an example, these kind of people where, that they're bouncing around ideas, they're getting some advice. McLaren are fantastic at it with their pure McLaren.
Yeah, they're very good.
Very good. That's certainly the benchmark for me, at least.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Well, I normally sort of wrap these up with 5 questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
First question. 5-car garage, unlimited value, and you can't have 5 monos.
Right. Well, I'm looking around my office here because I'm a bit of a car model geek collector, actually.
Oh, you can get some of these out for the people that are watching on YouTube.
They're actually in a glass box in most cases, but let me see if I can get some of the miniature versions, which are a bit more accessible. So this is an absolute straight winner. This is Lancia Stratos. This is a very famous car, this one. I've got our friends at Pirelli will be happy with the Marco Alain one. Nice. And I've got 5.
So a couple of Lancia Stratos.
I've got 5 Lancia Stratoses. There you go. That's the question answered. Obviously a mono, definitely. Yeah. Lancia Stratos.
Which mono?
I'd have to have Mono R. It's. I mean, with the magnesium components on it and everything, and the power in the engine and the last hurrah. I mean, I've actually got an amazing model of a Zonda R for all the same reasons. I think that's the best car they've ever made. So we started off with the Stratos, and it'd be the Group 4 version, the rally version for sure. I'd also have.
Would you take that rallying or just hooning? Just driving around? I
think I'd do a bit of posh rallying. So some of these kind of Eiffel Rally type events, these tarmac events, those kind of thing. Then I'd have a Mark II Escort.
Cool.
So again, that would be a 1978 RS 1800 kind of Roger Clark type car. Definitely need a Group B car. I'm quite rally. So I'd definitely have a Group B car. And I'm torn on Group B. I love the RS 200. John Wheeler's a personal friend of mine who designed the car and worked with him a long time ago. So I'm just going to have to say Group B rally car there because I love the.
Come on.
Well, I love the 6R4 and I love that. I'm just looking at the and I love the. Let's go RS 200. RS 200. So it's two Fords and a Lancia.
Yeah. Do you have a daily driver in this scenario?
Well, my daily driver's an i8. I've had one for 5 years, and I think it's an incredible car, and I'll have it for the foreseeable. So maybe we've got to throw that in there. And I've said a Mono, so there's 5, isn't it? I think.
No, you had Mono. Did you have a Stratos?
Stratos, yeah. RS 1800, RS 200, RS 1800. Oh, and of course, I'll have to say 458 Speciale Ferrari, which for me is just pure symphony engine performance. Just amazing.
Yeah, they are pretty great and pretty fun to drive.
Yes.
Right, next question. If you could only drive one car for the rest of your life and you're allowed like a £500 beater on the side.
Right, so it's one car for 500 quid?
No. You've got one car.
Yes.
And then you've technically got two. You've got one car, any car, and then you've got a 500 quid car that you can like put luggage in or whatever.
Okay.
On the side.
Well,
so
I guess...
it doesn't have to be 4 seats.
Okay, right, got you. I guess that, I own a Ferrari 360 Modena with, it's all got...
Manual?
It's manual, it's manual, left-hand drive. I bought that nearly 20 years ago, and that's going to my two boys when I'm in the ground nice. in the very distant future, I hope. So I guess it'd be that because I've had that for nearly 20 years, and I'm never going to get rid of that.
Yeah,
and the i8 is the daily driver, so there you go.
There we go. Okay, what do you think is the most undervalued car at the moment? What do you think's cheap relative to what it should be?
I think in terms of value for money, I think the Fiesta ST, as an example, is an incredible car for its performance and capability. Undervalued. I mean, I know that the i8 is a second-hand. Are we talking second-hand now or brand new?
Yeah, any like second-hand, new, anything.
I mean, I think the i8s at the moment are an incredible second-hand buy. They're never going to be repeated. I think they're going to be a future classic. For me, I love that car. I can get my 3 kids in it. I can be a bit of a hooligan when it's safe to do it, and I can drive it in full electric mode. I think it's an incredible car.
What is a second-hand i8 nowadays? Or is this something you don't want to know?
Yeah, I think you're looking at about 50 grand for a 3-year-old one. They're a 110 grand car. 911's a great value for money as well, aren't they? But I wouldn't say they're undervalued. I think I will go for the i8. How's that?
Cool. Yeah. And final question: what's the most interesting car to you at the moment? What are you sort of looking up, Googling, watching videos of, being like, ooh, that's interesting? I'm
going to be boring, and I'm going to say I'm dreaming about building an RS 1800 rally car. So at the moment, I'm looking at I'm looking at into all those different components. In terms of modern day cars, though, and technology, I think Polestar are doing some pretty amazing things. Okay. I like what they're about in terms of a brand. It's quite difficult to be, the area that I'm from is V8, V6s, inline 4s, inline 6s, V12s, turbos. And now it's electric motors and battery management systems. So I think what that's doing is it's driving more of a focus on design, aesthetic appearance and interaction and so on and so forth. And I think Polestar are in some great places. Keep our eye on what Mike Flewitt and the guys are doing at McLaren. I think they're doing amazing things. They've got some great people, great technology and suppliers. And of course, Porsche, I think they're doing some amazing things as well with their new product. But it's hard, isn't it? With new things that come out, you see the kind of press information that's given out, and then it's only after 6 months or 9 months, a year, do you really get the real the real world, I suppose.
Yeah, like used in the UK or whatever. And
yeah, I mean, I think it's an amazing time to be involved in the car industry at the moment with whether it's mild hybrids or EVs or whatever. We'll go for Polestar. How's that?
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Cool. Well, that wraps up the podcast. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for coming on.
No, pleasure. And thanks for listening.
Yeah, it was good.